Hills and hollows of Clifton, Tennessee, gossip flows as steady as the streams that run through town. So when 21-year-old Rose Goggins vanishes, leaving behind a 10-month-old baby boy, everyone has a theory as to what may have become of her.
There was rumors going around, but I did get asked. I told them it's still under investigation. We don't need to discuss it. We didn't want to speak out of turn and jeopardize our case.
Hi, Kathy. This is Detective Moore calling again.
Speaking with Rose's grieving mother, Detective Moore must ask her to recount another painful event.
That was happening right underneath my house, right under my own roof, to find out my husband was messing with Rose, and life really fell apart then.
Agent Sullivan, here to see Rob Smith.
Rose's stepfather is currently at a halfway house in Georgia.
The FBI actually talked to him and trying to determine if he had any knowledge of what happened to Rose or had any inkling as to what was going on.
Have a seat. I'm looking for Rose Goggins.
Rose?
She's missing.
I don't go anywhere near her. I wish I could help, but I had nothing to do with her disappearing. I have a monitor on.
After they had talked to him, they were pretty well satisfied that he did not have any involvement or knowledge of the case.
Soda and beer cans, footprints, a burned car, with no clear suspect and only a smattering of mysterious clues. Investigators begin to worry that Rose's disappearance may never be solved.
We were all scared. We were not used to this kind of danger or feeling unsteady or unsafe.
With all leads basically getting cold, word comes out of the Wayne County Jail that someone wants to talk. A local handyman being held for a probation violation claims to have a story to tell.
Zach Anderson was an inmate in the Wayne County Jail, and when he found out that Rose was a missing person and presumed dead, he wanted to talk to us.
Well, go ahead. You've got our attention.
Usually when someone comes forth like this and wants to give us information, if they're in jail, they want some kind of consideration for the information they're given, but he never asked for anything. He needed to give us information and get it off his conscience. Zach had worked for the Beiersdorf in 2009, and he had a lot of knowledge about the conversations they had had concerning Rose.
And what would you say was their demeanor toward Rose?
Hates. Sheer hatred. Especially Grandma Sylvia.
And why is that?
Maybe because Rose ratted her son out.
The information he provided us in the statement was he was present one particular day, and he was telling us parts of the conversation where Sylvia was talking about she needed to get rid of that bitch.
Later that night, we sit around drinking.
Hey, you want to make some money?
Big Steve offered Zach $1,000 if he would kidnap Rose and just bring her to the house, and said he would take care of the rest of it, him not to worry about anything because no body, no murder.
According to Zach, Sylvia and her sister Donna were both present for the conversation. His story is so remarkable, investigators wonder if it can possibly be true. Could he have a score of his own to settle with his former employers?
I think it's like any other information that comes from a jailhouse snitch. You have to take it and you have to evaluate it and put it as part of the puzzle. But certainly it has to be corroborated.
And why didn't you come to us then?
Zach felt like he didn't know at the time how legit and how true they were meaning that, but now that Rose has disappeared, that he felt like because they approached him that they could have approached someone else, or they were capable of doing something.
You said you were drinking beers with Stephen Sr. What kind of beers?
The cheap stuff.
It was a turning point. This provided us with someone providing a statement that Sylvia and Steve Sr. had made the comments they wanted to get rid of Rose.
Armed with a warrant, investigators head out to the Beiersdorf's compound.
It was determined that we would go out, the FBI agents along with the Wayne County Sheriff's Office and the TBI agents would go to the house, interview all the family members, interview them separately, and try to get some understanding of what happened and what was going on.
Walked in the house, it almost looked like a model home. There was nothing out of place. Everything in the house looked almost staged. It is absolutely the cleanest house I've ever been in my life. The living situation at the house, the entire family actually lived there. Stephen and Rose lived upstairs, and so did Sylvia and Big Steve. Josh and his wife lived in the basement.
Jenny, can we talk? Privately?
The Beiersdorf attitude towards women was that the man kind of controlled the situation. The women couldn't talk to Stephen Sr. unless they were spoken to first. Stephen Sr. was very domineering in the home, just controlled everything.
It had to be very uncomfortable in a house that you can't speak to the man who lives there for fear of what was to happen to you.
Which is why investigators make sure Josh's girlfriend Jenny is nowhere near the others when they start their questioning.
So what can you tell me about Rose?
Jeannie was a little upset. Remember, she was kind of uneasy. She was also pregnant during the time, and I know a couple of times we were concerned about the pregnancy.
The question that gets her the most emotional is one about Rose leaving her son behind.
She had told us that she was aware of a prior boyfriend that Rose had talked to, but she did not give any indication that she thought there was anything more than just being friends.
I was observing the ones that wasn't being interviewed at that time, and I noticed that Mr. Beiersdorf, very oddly, he would get up from a couch of where he was sitting and he'd go stare out the window across the field. And I found that very, very odd that he would do that.
Steve, we want you to come back with us to the station.
Investigators want the elder Beiersdorfs to take what's known as a vocal stress test.
A voice stress analysis test is just based on the stress of your voice when you answer a question. A question like, is today Monday, should have no stress. And if you say, did you kill Rose, that should show an extreme amount of stress if you are guilty of it or have knowledge.
It's no problem. We can take a test for you.
So Mr. Beiersdorf, along with Sylvia, were transported to Wayne County Sheriff's Office.
Prior to interviewing him, we had discussed how Steve would react with me being part of the interview because I was a woman in the way Steve addresses women. So it was decided that the TBI agent would conduct most of the interview. I could feel the tension of me being in the room with him. It was just the way he stared at me, like he stared.
Him believes that anything he says is the truth. Everybody seemed like they were very tense and very nervous at that time.
Hold on a second. I want to take this test.
It was at that point that the TBI agent said, Stephen, if you didn't kill Rose Goggins, because I believe that you had something to do with her death, that we really need to know who did.
We have sources saying you threatened to harm Rose. And your previous story doesn't hold up based on everything we've learned about this young lady.
I did it.
He began to make statements like, I'm going to go to the electric chair. I'm going to get a lethal injection over this.
How did you do it?
She had it coming for a long time. And that day I'd had enough.
We have sources saying you threatened to harm Rose. And your previous story doesn't hold up based on everything we've learned about this young lady.
I did it.
He stated that he and Rose got into an altercation at his shop at the Beiersdorf residence, and it's a pretty violent exchange. And he was accusing Rose of going out with other men, and if Steve turned around to walk away, she threw a bottle at him and hit him in the back of the head. And he said that pissed him off, and he turned around, walked back over to the car.
I just reached in that open car window and I choked her as hard as I could.
How did you know she was dead?
And his response to that was, well, I heard her gurgling, and then I didn't hear her gurgling anymore.
And what happened next?
They headed away from the Beiersdorf house, went to the Cross-Eyed Cricket, which is a little convenience store, and he went inside, bought a couple of 2-liter Cokes, poured the contents out, and then put gas in the bottles. Now this was the whole time Rose was sitting in the front seat of the car, deceased.
Drove it out of town, torched it right there on that old logging road where I all found it.
There were no remains in the car. What'd you do with the body?
No body, no murder. I dumped that in the river. Might as well be in the ocean by now.
The chilling confession somewhat matches the artifacts of the case. Problem is, police don't believe Stephen's story is entirely true.
One of the things that was relatively easy was to go and talk to the folks at the Cross-Eyed Cricket to determine if, in fact, Beiersdorf had been in there and purchased these gasoline items. Everybody knows everybody in Clifton, so if somebody came in the evening hours, somebody would most likely remember that.
About a week ago, do you remember seeing Stephen Beiersdorf Sr. in here buying soda, gasoline?
The TBI, along with search and rescue teams from Decatur, Wayne, and several other counties, spent the day searching 10 miles of the Tennessee River for Rose Goggins' body. They are using sonar equipment to see deep into the murky water.
Massive. There was the full response of EMS. They had set up a command post. It was a massive response. Boats were launched to try to recover this young lady's body.
From the bridge where he supposedly said that he dropped her, and, further down, if there was a body, it could have traveled some distance down the river. So it was a huge task.
Given the fruitless effort, detectives are left wondering, if Stephen Beiersdorf's taunting confession cannot be confirmed, was there ever any truth to it?
He said numerous times, no body, no murder. And I think if he thought we were not able to find the body, that then we could not prove there had been a murder.
One clue that Stephen's story doesn't account for. At the scene of the burning car, there were 2 sets of footprints. Stephen Sr. is covering for someone. The question is, who? Now authorities end their efforts to corroborate Big Steve's story and double down on separating the facts they've proved from the fiction he's been peddling.
So if Stephen was alone at the car, then who left these footprints?
Could the prints have been made by Beiersdorf matriarch Sylvia? If so, then Stephen Sr. is lying about hitchhiking home.
We requested his phone records, we requested Sylvia's phone records, and we were actually able to confirm that both their cell phones were hitting the towers along the path from their residence to where the vehicle was.
The fact that the crime was at least aided and abetted by Sylvia is now all but confirmed in the minds of investigators. What's yet to be determined is how Rose's remains were discarded and where they may be found.
Steve had the mentality that there's no body, no crime. We always had that gut feeling that she was on the property somewhere. So we just continued to talk to one another and talk to the district attorney. And he was able to finally approve that we have a search warrant and that we could search the property.
Ken Martin.
And just as the warrant comes in, so does another key bit of information.
You're not going to believe this. Rose's car had a GPS.
Rose's car was right on the verge of being repossessed, and the people from the car lot came down and told us that there was a GPS on the car. It had pinged at 12 midnight, and the car had not left the Beiersdorf residence, and it pinged again in McNairy County, and then it went dead.
This conflicts with Stephen Sr.'s story of driving Rose's body and her car away right after he killed her. Why wait so long to move the car?
We arrived on scene with the dogs, and I said, we got to put our minds here and don't give up and look.
Initially, when we first made contact in the house with them, we were all in the living room area, and there were several of us that noted that Steve was looking out to the field.
We went northwest on the property, and we got middle ways of the field, and her dog caught the scent and actually went to the burn pile immediately. I started digging around with a stick, and then a piece of flesh. It was already decaying and burned and charred, and it had a very foul smell. It smelled like human. I knew I'd found Rose.
The bones would fit in a coffee cup. So she burnt. She was cremated about 60 feet from the kitchen window.
What we found they did is burned the body and then took the backhoe and brought dirt from another area and actually put it over some of the burn area, and then took the backhoe and actually pounded her in the ground and just scattered her remains.
I think Steve thought that he got rid of every piece of evidence there was, that we would never find anything to prove that she was on the property.
He was wrong. DNA from the piece of flesh found proves the remains are those of Rose Goggin. Big Steve Beiersdorf is charged with first-degree murder, and his wife Sylvia is charged as a co-conspirator.
I mean, they're just cold-hearted, just what I would define as evil.
Rose trusted everybody. You know, she didn't think people would be bad people. She was wrong this time.
Faced with a death penalty, Steve Sr. takes a plea deal and receives 99 years. Sylvia also avoids trial. She receives 15 years for her guilty plea to criminal conspiracy to commit homicide. She will be eligible for parole in just 6 years.
I believe the mother did it. I'll always believe that the mother did it. And everybody else did the covering up.
And she has no remorse. None. None. And they still don't really know what really happened, what took place.